Have you ever found yourself in a situation you didn't choose, wondering how you ended up there? Maybe it was a job you didn't want, or a difficult relationship, or a challenge that disrupted what your plans were. How did you feel in that moment? What was your response? We all love to watch a good story or read a good story, whether it's, Frodo and Bilbo in Middle-earth, or whether we're captivated by a romance. Will Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet end up in love? Will Fievel find his family in American Tail, right? The heart of every great story is conflict. It's the tension, it's the uncertainty, the challenges that keep us turning the pages, that keep us watching, eager to see what happens next. We don't normally care for stories that are too predictable. In fact, I don't know about you, but I don't think I have it in me for another Hallmark Christmas movie, Oh, is she going to marry the businessman who's always on the phone back in the city? Or is she going to end up with the dude in flannel that just seems to get under her skin, We're entertained by the conflict in fictional stories. But in our lives, in our realities, the elements that make the stories we watch or that we read interesting are the same elements that give us anxiety. The same elements that we're always trying to avoid, trying to get past. In real life, I don't know about you, but we hate conflict. Something unpredictable throws us for a loop. We're like, why, God? We prefer predictability. We prefer safety and control. When it comes to our own lives, we want the story to stay in the Shire, to never venture out to where it becomes difficult. Yet, like in our favorite stories, it's often in the unexpected and challenging moments of life that the most significant growth and transformation happens. In the Bible, when we read about Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we need to recognize that their story is not a fictional one. We may know the end, we may understand the reason, but they didn't. The story they had to live was not a story they chose for themselves. In the year 605 BCE, Daniel and his friends were ripped away from their homes. They were taken to a faraway land. They were thrust into a culture that was beyond anything they understood. And in the face of the chaos, in the face of the overwhelming difficulty, they had to deal with it, right? In Daniel 1:1-2, we read that the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. The Lord, even though it looked like the Babylonians were in charge, it was actually God who was orchestrating events according to his sovereign plan. Daniel's life was not spinning out of control, even if it may have felt that way. God was still writing the story. And Daniel's response to this unchosen adventure was not one of despair or rebellion. Instead, he chose to trust God and remain faithful in the midst of what felt like undeserved suffering. He didn't get to choose this circumstance, but he did get to choose how he would respond to it. And in doing so, Daniel became a key figure in God's unfolding story. See, 7 years after Daniel and the guys were brought into Babylon, a second group of exiles came. There was the young king Jeconiah, much of the royal house, 7,000 of Israel's most valiant warriors, 1,000 of their top craftsmen brought to Babylon. And when they arrived in Babylon, guess what had already happened? Right? The Lord had been at work preparing a place for them, not to harm them, but for his own safekeeping. They arrive in Babylon to discover that one of their own, Daniel, has been made ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief over all the wise men of Babylon. And not just him, Azariah, Hananiah, Mishael, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have been appointed as administrators. Right? It felt like the exile was punishment, but Babylon was God's own safety deposit box. Right? The Lord told Jeremiah that I'm putting the good figs there, and I'm going to bring them back to a cleansed land. I'm going to form them. And the Lord brought them back, and not just the people. The treasures that had been stolen, those were brought back later too. In our own lives, we can face circumstances that we didn't choose, situations that are painful, challenging, or even terrifying. But just like in Daniel's story, God is still the author. Even when things seem chaotic or uncertain, we're called to trust him, cooperate with his purposes, and to choose faithfulness even in the face of the unknown. Because sometimes what looks like punishment, what looks like a plan to harm, is actually a plan for good. I mean, that's what Jeremiah 29:11 is talking about. Saying this may look like a plan to hurt you, but the Lord says, I know the plans I have for you. Plans for shalom, not for harm. Plans to give you hope and a future. Right? The conflict, the discomfort, it's just the middle of your story that the author and the finisher of your faith is still writing. And it's going to be a great ending.